Okay, good evening, everybody. I think everybody who should be here is here. So if you're happy, we'll proceed with the meeting. Just a few things to deal with by way of commencement. Welcome to this first meeting of the Scrutiny Committee of Melton Borough Council since the local elections. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak, and to use their microphones when speaking, and to switch them off when they're finished speaking. I have to be reminded of that quite frequently. The microphone is live when the red light displays. Please switch all mobile phones to silent. Should you need to leave the room during the meeting, unless it's an emergency evacuation, which we'll come on to when emergency exits should be used, please use the marked exit and entrance. I'll now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits. The one furthest from the fire would probably be best. Which are situated around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance, and officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. I'll just remind you that the public are allowed to be here, and they are allowed to record the meeting. There's legislation that allows the public to film, record, or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. So those are the preliminary items. As I move on to the agenda, can I just draw your attention to the fact that we have here this evening Advet Chef, who's the planning manager for strategy and planning from Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland Integrated Care Board. And I've agreed that his item, which is item 7 on the agenda, should be switched with the CCTV item, which will allow him to get away in reasonable time because of his travelling. The committee will be happy with that. Okay, are there any apologies for absence?
There are no apologies for absence, Chair.
Thank you. We move on to item 2 on the agenda, which are the minutes of the last meeting. We need to confirm the minutes of that meeting. Of course, the majority of us here tonight weren't on the committee on April the 18th, but I believe there are 4 here who were. So can I have a proposal that we accept the minutes?
I'm happy to propose.
I'll second.
Okay, so those minutes are approved. Thank you. All right, item 3, are there any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda for this meeting? None. All right. Item 4. Now you have attached to your paperwork the forward plan, and it's here on the agenda for Scrutiny Committee, so we can identify any relevant items for inclusion in the Scrutiny work programme, or to request further information on the forward plan. So I'm happy to receive any comments from members of the committee in that respect. I'll take silence as meaning no one wishes to add anything or comment. Right, item 5, review of the Scrutiny work programme. That's also attached in your papers. I'd like to draw your attention in particular to the fact that we have a number of scrutiny reviews, and these were agreed at the workshop that we held some little time ago. And we have to decide about those this evening. 3 of the 4 reviews would have to be completed by mid-September. And this is because they feed into the corporate strategy and also the state of Melton debate. And we therefore have to accept the timescales that are set out, which do have implications in terms of the commitment from committee members to attend and make these work, or to prioritise those workshops with a view that 1 or 2 might not take place. So I'm going to open it up to comments from members of the committee. to see whether you have any views in that respect. Clearly, you know, if the feeling is we need to go ahead with all of those workshops, that represents a commitment from you all to putting the time in to make them happen. So are there any comments from members of the committee?
Yeah, well, obviously, as I've seen these programmes, it's not the commitment from us, because obviously, in my opinion, scrutiny members shouldn't be on these programmes, apart from maybe one, as pointed out. We're putting the emphasis on the rest of the members of the council and the officers to do all of this. And it's the officers probably who have got the biggest workload of all this. And it does seem to me, some of these are unnecessary, and there seems to be a lot going on here. And I think I've always said in scrutiny, it's important that when we do something, we do it well. We don't stretch it to unnecessary things that won't have any significant outcome. So my view is that this should be rationalised. I think in a scrutiny programme, when you've got big things, and there are big things on this, it should be whittled down, in my opinion, to about 3 or 4. So that in the year, the officers, and we are already significantly into this year, in the year we can have 3 or 4 significant outcomes on important. And that doesn't mean some of these aren't important, but I think we all know there's no point in stretching the work that the officers have got to a stage where everything's done. I'm trying to put this carefully with Michelle here, mediocre, because she hasn't got the staff to actually dedicate and prioritise. So I would rather see, you know, this being whittled down to what is important and what isn't. That doesn't mean they're not important, but less important, and therefore we have to make that decision, really. But we have to go with the officers' advice too, as to what they think they can do in the time frame and what they can't. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Could I invite you to make any suggestions as to priorities that you might have?
Sorry, I've lost the mic, have I? No, how did I do that? That was good. Obviously, I think it's important, rather than me make decisions now, to hear from other members rather than me just being pushy here. But I think as a group, we need to whittle this down to 3 or 4, look at each one, and maybe just go through each one and see if members say that's really important or not. I think that would be the best way to do this, Chair, just to go through each one and then listen to the officers as to how much that work involved in each one. And then we whittle it down from there. That's just my view, Chair. You know, and I know other members agree with me, but I think to me, and I know, I'm sure a former chair of the scrutiny group would agree, we've got too much on this work programme to make a meaningful contribution this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments that members wish to make?
Yeah,
Councillor.
yeah, I do tend to agree with Councillor Evans. You know, having what we did 22 workshops and committee meetings combined last year, which I think was a record. I do believe the officers are not good. I'll let them speak for themselves, but they're not going to have time to do this work. And so, yeah, I would agree that a lot of it needs deferring. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members wish to make a comment? Suggestions? And maybe Michelle, you'd like to make some.
Do this, shouldn't I? It would be helpful, I think, at this stage, if we talk to the officer who's responsible for assigning all of these tasks. They've obviously put this agenda together. And Michelle, I know she's a brilliant officer. I'm sure she'll prioritise and tell us whether she's really got the staff to do all of this work in the forthcoming 9 months.
Yeah, Would you like to comment there, Michelle?
Yeah, happy to come in. So the first thing I'll say is this is your work programme as a committee. So, you need to be comfortable with what's on here and how things are spread. So the documents in front of you spread into a number of sections, and I think it's just helpful to take you through that so we're clear on how that's been developed. So I don't think all of you were present, but many of you were present for the workshop planning session a few weeks ago, and that is how we've arrived at this. So this is not an officer-driven piece of work. This has been a collaborative piece of work. The sections that this is split into, the first is around scrutiny reviews, and this is the area that would lend itself to workshops, but this is also the area that potentially is quite heavy from a work programme perspective. So this is over and above the meetings that you have set in your calendars for your committee meetings. So if I was to give you any advice as a committee, I would say look at those 4 subjects within the scrutiny review section. If you would like to rationalise your work programme, that might be an area that you want to prioritise. The next section is around the member task and finish groups. So they're not within the remit of the scrutiny committee, but it was important that you were aware of that, and clearly your role and input into that will be important. Now, when we come on to the sessions on the section that's headed one-off items forward plan, and the planner there. So this is where you've got a number of items. So 1, 2, through to 11. The way in which this has been done is we've taken those subjects that you told us that you wanted to focus on as a committee over the year, and we've spread them across the meetings for the year, and we've been careful to not overload any one meeting. So if you want to have all of those items spread across the year, then that's absolutely fine. From an officer perspective, we can manage that, and we believe there's value in that. But if you are asking me for areas that I feel, you could perhaps create yourself some space in the agenda, in your work programme, then perhaps I would suggest around the light bulb programme and the homelessness strategy as examples, because they're things that you'll have involvement in other ways. But I would be cautious about you taking anything else off the agenda just because of the value and impact that I think scrutiny can have on those subjects. So my advice would be, if you want to do some prioritisation, go back to that first section and think about those workshops. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. I mean, obviously, I've discussed this with the officers and after the workshop that we had, in order to develop the work programme. The only change in the work programme since then has been add an item, in actual fact, at the request of a member of the committee. But I'd echo what Michelle has said, that I think in terms of the committee meetings for the year, it's scheduled so there will be 1 or 2 items per meeting, which we think is reasonable. And of course, there are some areas there. I mean, this committee does have the brief for crime and disorder and for health and well-being. So there are areas which we have to deal with as part of our programme, as well as looking at the important issue of the budget when it comes along. So I think the committee meetings, we're fairly confident that they can be covered. It really does come down to the potential for workshops. And I'm just trying to, excuse me while I scroll back to them. And equally, the policy development groups, which stand outside of the committee does not appoint to those, but there will be scrutiny members on those. But that's being driven really by the development of the corporate strategy. So they will have to happen. So it is the 4 workshops, which we all agree are important issues. But I think if we're going to drop anything off the programme to feel confident that we can deal with all the issues presented to us during the course of the year, those are the ones that we need to look at. Either by saying we don't proceed with workshops at the extreme, or by saying we'll only do 1, 2 or 3 of them rather than all 4. But it's really in the hands of you as the committee and to decide if that's the way you want to go. The sense I've got from those who've spoken so far is there is a feeling we ought to contract to some extent. But rather than arbitrarily be between me and the officers, I'd welcome views from members as to which of those 4 issues they think are more important or less important. Not that any of them are unimportant.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. Which is the difficulty. But what we think, maybe from the point of view of our own wards and the people we represent, what we think would be most appropriate and relevant for us to concentrate on.
Yeah, I think the workshop on the 21st of September on the cattle market in the stockyard. I think that should stay on as a priority. I don't know what, I know I spoke to your vice chairman and he seemed to back my suggestion. I don't know what other people think. Whether
It's not a workshop, is it?
is it workshop?
No, it's
No.
not.
That's
It-
one off.
It's a substantive,
Yeah.
meeting, so.
Was that a workshop?
No, it's a.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Yes, it come from there. I've got you.
The 4 workshops are on
Yeah.
page
Yeah,
33.
sorry, I misled. It was agreed at a workshop. Got you. Thank you.
As Michelle knows, I'm never quiet. To me, on the workshops, and I'm just going to put it to the future leisure provision to me is the most vital one, because I think anybody who knows where we are in leisure, unfortunately, in this borough knows how, well, not poor, but how we need to make a future there, because we all know that the swimming pool, etc., is tired. That's the right word to use, and Michelle, tired, and needs a refresh of some description, however that's, but I think that's I think most of our citizens, because the other ones, I have to say, the other 3 are a bit too generic to me to be focused enough for me to feel that they will have some kind of positive outcome. Whereas the leisure provision, to me, it's in just like the asset one and the other ones that are in the work programs, work groups, whatever they're called. They're vital in the future leisure provision to me. And I am quite confused, Michelle, why that future leisure provision, which, let's be honest, is incredibly important, we all know where we are, isn't also having a group of councillors looking at it at this moment. I know you've already gone through contracts and all the rest of it, but to me, that should be in that list that we should be, looking at and seeing where we're going now, because it's going to be too late. The other 3 to me are just generic and of not, and trying to put it the same way as you did, not of significance this particular year. I think we've got some real bigger headaches in that list you've got down there rather than those 3. Thank you.
Okay, if I could just comment, Councillor Evans, on the future leisure vision. So the reason, future leisure provision, sorry, the reason it's not proposed as one of the wider task and finish groups is because those task and finish groups are subject to approval due to commence, and they are about really starting to think ahead for the new corporate strategy. And there will be lots of views coming together within that. Leisure is slightly different because we've got a number of distinct processes. So we've got a responsibility right now in terms of stabilising that current contract and making sure that we minimise financial loss to this council relating to that contract. We are in the midst of a procurement process which is commercially sensitive and not changeable at this moment in time. So as members, you will get a say on the award of that contract at council at the appropriate time. And then the third element is around what do we do about the future? Exactly that, the challenge that you've described, how do we have a plan for the future? And at this moment in time, we are not in a position to bring the details of the what ifs and the aspirations forward to you to debate in a meaningful way as a committee. Or with a task and finish group. So we feel that trying to keep those things distinct and separate is the right thing to do, but to make sure that when those options, considerations for members around the future of leisure are ready, that as a scrutiny committee, you will add huge value to that. So that was our suggestion as to why that would be a scrutiny review as opposed to a task and finish group, which I hope makes sense in terms of timing. And we do have to keep the procurement discussion completely separate to any of those other discussions to protect that commercial sensitivity of it now that we're in the midst of that process. So that was the reason for that. The timing of a scrutiny review into the future of leisure would then be flexible depending on when that information is available for you to discuss and consider in a meaningful way to then inform the wider discussion. So I hope that helps. That was the reason. And that was a decision that was taken deliberately because we started off trying to think about leisure in the same context of what do we do with the town centre, and it just didn't feel like we could do that in a meaningful way at that point.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Gordon wanted to.
Yes, I think we should also have supporting an ageing population. because when I read the report to do with this, for the projections for the coming years, it says that there's going to be about 45 to 48% of people that are aging, that's over the age of 65. And obviously we're going to get a lot of illnesses and age-related, that sort of people that fall down with hips, breaking bones and things like that. So there's going to be a lot of that we need to support them with. So that obviously will involve the NHS as well. But yes, I think we have really got to do this as a priority, and that's what I would like to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Are there any more comments that committee members would like to make or suggestions regarding priorities in particular?
I look, and obviously I've heard what Michelle says. If I need supporting an aging population, no one's going to be against that. But what I suppose fundamentally I have an issue with is what are we going to do? We all know our budget is incredibly tight. Michelle, if we had Dawn here, she'd say you got no money, or words to that effect. Each one of these, I have to ask, what's it going? How is it going to add value to our community? How is it going to help them? And that's my concern. The NHS, and we all know that the aging population is a big problem for them. And I'm sure we're concerned with it. It's a question of what comes out of each one of these four. And even the fourth one, though, the future leisure provision, from where we are, you're saying we're not in a position to really look at that in long term. And if that's the case, I don't personally see why any of these four is really going to give. I want to see some statement that says what they're going to do, what they're going to actually, rather than us sitting here, as they all think we do outside, and talk. And that, when at the end of the day, if we're not careful, all four of these will not have anything coming out of them that is meaningful to our residents, which is what we want all to happen here. And the last thing I want Michelle to do is get her officers working hard on something. And at the end of the day, and it's happened in the past, we all know it has, there's no meaningful concrete outcome of that. And I don't see anything really of this that we can resolve here at the moment and this year at the moment. But that's just my view, Chair.
Yeah.
I think what we need to look at is, what do we want to achieve? Is it possible to achieve it when we're looking at those four? What do we want actually to come out of it? So is it possible that we get the right results and we go on that rather than airy-fairy, if you like? We need to look at what outcome are we looking for? Can we achieve that outcome and then go with whatever we decide, rather than, oh, we could get this or we could get that?
Yeah, Mike. I think to enable us to move on, we ought to have a paper at the next meeting, or slot a meeting in, on what these are likely to achieve. Have 4 columns, so we're all clear what is achievable. And that's what I would propose, because at the moment we're just going round in circles. And if there's a pro forma with the suitable headings on, and it comes to the next workshop committee.
If I might just assist the committee then. So at the workshop planning session, that rationale was provided. So I think we can absolutely bring that paper forward and add any further detail that you're looking for. In terms of the leisure provision, I know there's certainly more detail I can add, and I would urge flexibility around when you might consider that as a committee, if you consider it as a committee. But there is nothing requiring you to agree to any of these workshops this evening. And obviously, the work plan was within your gift to bring forward those subjects at a later time. You could put them on a reserve list if you chose to do so. Councillor Gordon, one of the things that you'll hear hopefully later when we get onto the community health and wellbeing plan, that an ageing population is included within that. So that may then serve a purpose in terms of the so what linked to that. But yeah, so if that helps, it might be something you want to revisit at a later stage in the work programme, Chair.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, before I thought I might wade in, because I don't think the chair's neutral in these meetings. I can have an opinion. Does anybody else want to add anything before I make my comments? I mean, my view, and I've reflected on this over the last week or so, is rather akin to what Councillor Evans has said, that I think all of these are important issues. We can all identify with how each of them points to huge issues we're going to have over the next few years, not just in Melton, but in other parts of the county. But I tend to agree that at this point in time, it's hard to see what the focused outcome is going to be on some of the more general ones. So I would be in favour of not proceeding with the first three of those workshops for that reason. On leisure provision, I think the opportunity to have a debate and to make suggestions about the direction of travel on leisure would be of value, and I think is actually rather important given where we are. I had the pleasure of a tour of Waterfield a couple of weeks ago, and I have a much better grasp of the challenges facing us as a result of that. But it's not just about Waterfield, it's about the whole direction of travel in the borough, and not just in Melton, may I say, before anyone comments in that respect. And I think it would be of value for us to proceed with the workshop on leisure. Now, quite about the timing, again, Michelle, I think the suggestion for that date was very much linked to where other things are, and to hold it later might not be as beneficial. So what I would encourage the committee to do is to agree to defer the first three workshops, recognising that some of the issues in them are being picked up elsewhere, as we'll find in the report we come on to later on this agenda. But we do proceed with the leisure provision workshop. And so we have an opportunity to have some debate and some input into the development of that, the policies around that.
This, the one thing, scrutiny, whether scrutiny is involved in this or not, I don't know. The one thing I know, I'm not a ward member for here, is the one thing that keeps coming up again for residents in Melton, and I know we have limited impact in this, is the GP provision, Latham House and all the rest of it. And I'll say, I'll put this on record, it is appalling that our residents can wait for a month or two to actually get an appointment. Nowhere else in the borough does that occur. I know that, I've done a survey, doesn't happen. We need, as a council, to do everything we can to make certain that the residents in the NHS have access to a GP, and it's not happening at the moment, and I find it appalling. Every tea room I go into, every time, if there's old people in there, all they talk about is they can't get, and even at the food bank, they say, we can't get in a Latham House for a month. And that's not acceptable in this country, and it shouldn't be. And I don't know how we do it or what we do it, but all of this looks like, to me, kindergarten stuff compared to that lack of provision. I know the past council tried, but we need to keep pushing that on the agenda wherever we can, Chair, because, you know, all of this would look like nothing if you could get a second Latham House or whatever. Because at the moment, I've been in there and they're absolutely stretched beyond belief with what, and it is appalling that Melton doesn't have a decent GP. And it's not, I don't blame the people, the staff there, they just haven't got the facilities or anything to do their job.
Councillor Evans, I'd like, yeah, maybe you can tell me outside of the meeting how anyone managed to get an appointment as quickly as a month. That's not been my experience. Councillor Gordon.
Yes, what's happening is you can't get the doctors to come on the NHS. I mean, a lot of the doctors, a lot of them are part-time, they're sort of on NHS and then doing private, but a lot of doctors are leaving to do private work. And that's the problem. We can't get the NHS doctors. That's it. Yeah.
So I think I don't think any of us are going to disagree with the importance of the issue, but I'm not sure how it fits in with the scrutiny program at this moment. What I would hope, and I would pay, tribute to the efforts of the previous administration to push this, and I'm sure the current administration is doing likewise, and hopefully developments in respect to what may be possible regarding a doctor's surgery will emerge in the coming period, and it might then be very appropriate for us to want to take part in some way in looking at any proposals that emerge. And on that note, the other point about the scrutiny program, which I think I should have said earlier, is that I mean, what I've said to the officers, and I hope the committee will agree, is that we need some flexibility to review where we are, not just the standard review at each meeting, but in November time to see whether things have changed and we might want to be prioritising other issues. So it's quite possible we'd be looking at a different work programme in some respects later in the year. I think it's always important that we're a bit nimble on our feet to respond to what's needed, rather than simply go through a programme because we agreed it at some point earlier and things have become less relevant. Any further comments that committee members wish to make? Alan?
Yeah, I just want to back up what you just said, and the fact that we agreed this is a living document, and each time we're looking at this, and even in the workshops, if we're saying, at that point, if we can't get to something that's meaningful, we should stop the workshop. That's why we shouldn't sit here for. I don't think we need another meeting to go through the workshop again. I think we just need to agree this is a living document. It will change. It will, as we go through the year, different priorities will come up, and therefore we need to do what we can and as much as we can. And I'm sure Michelle will tell us if we're going to struggle to get that information and get the officers to give us that. And so that's where we should actually be focusing ourselves is that. And then, as we've said tonight, okay, I think something else should actually come onto the agenda. We should actually be looking at a different place. But at the end of the day, we are a scrutiny committee. We're not making decisions here. We're helping, we're I forget what the proper term was, but the gentle advisor to help that decision body.
Thank you. I just wanted to give some reassurance, actually, Councillor Evans, so that just for the benefit of the committee. So one of the papers on the agenda this evening is around the Community Health and Wellbeing Plan. One of the key things that comes through that plan is the feedback in the community and the evidence that tells us that additional GP provision is required and there's a real gap and challenge in the area. So please, as we get to that item, make those comments known. And I know that Abate will be taking those and we're making sure that those comments are known. So I just wanted to make sure that I was clear that there is a place for that to be discussed, and it's this evening initially. So I hope that helps. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Not forgetting my own rules. If there are no further comments, I'm just trying to pull this together. It seems to have actually, what's emerged from the discussion, there are actually two proposals. The first one, which is a combination of what Councillor Evans said and myself, I think, is that we proceed with the proposed workshop on leisure, but we defer, suspend, put on the reserve list the other three workshops. So that would be the first proposal. And the second proposal, which is what Councillor Child was suggesting, was that we ask for, before we make a decision, we ask for further amplification on what the benefits would be. So what I propose to do is put the first proposition forward, and inevitably, if that one's agreed by the committee, the second one would fall. So the first proposal would be that we do proceed with the workshop on future leisure provision, but the other three workshops are put on a reserve list or suspended from the active work programme for the time being.
Said it. I think I'm not saying it. You basically said the leisure one, the timing is important and it may need flexibility in that date. So at the moment we've got 30th of August, but you said leave it. Basically, you were saying to us, leave it with me. if the 30th of August isn't right because of the contract and all the rest of it, it'll just move to when we can get value out of it. Is that right?
Yeah, so my feedback was I want to make sure that when you consider future of leisure, that it is meaningful and that we bring the information to you at the right time. So speaking to colleagues, we believe it's September, October would be more relevant for that particular workshop. So if you are happy to leave it with us to liaise with the chair in relation to a timeline.
I'll withdraw mine because we've decided to move on, which is really what I was trying to achieve. Yeah.
For Councillor Chall, and thank you for that clarification, Michelle. Obviously, we'd all agree that we'd want to meet when we can do something useful. So we'll just wait to hear from you further regarding the date. So can I just, just to deal with this formally, can I just have a show of hands of people? People agree with the proposition that we proceed with the leisure workshop, but not with the other three. Good show of hands. Thank you. Well, that's unanimous. So we now move on to item 7. As we said, we'd reverse the order, and that is to receive a presentation around the report on community health and wellbeing, or the community health and wellbeing plan. We have Advet Sheth from the Health Service here with us, and also Aisha Rahman as the Assistant Director for Customer and Communities. And of course, you, Michelle, I'm sure will have something to add. So can I ask for the presentation, please?
Okay, so I'll start by introducing the report and I'll hand over to colleagues to take you through some of the details. So just by way of some background, there's a really positive opportunity emerging as a result of a requirement at a national level for greater collaboration between health and local authorities. And that collaboration extends through to district councils and work within local communities. And the development of an integrated care system within Leicestershire has been taking place over the last 12 months. And at the same time, there was a requirement to renew the health and wellbeing strategy for Leicestershire. And that work has also been done and was approved just a few months ago. Now, the health and wellbeing strategy for Leicestershire takes what's been called a life course approach. So it looks like how to give population of Leicestershire the best start in life, how to help them to stay healthy and well, how to help them to live and then be supported well, and also then how to considerations around dying well and being able to make the right choices in life and in death. What's recognised is that actually it's okay having a plan at that level, at a county-wide level, but what's really important is to understand, well, what does that mean then for us at a local level? What does it mean for us at a district level? Because the needs of Melton across the whole borough will be quite different to the needs of other parts of the county. So quite a lot of work was done a few months ago to develop a framework which saw the creation of something called community health and wellbeing plans. The idea being that they are based on evidence of what's needed at a local level. So this is looking at things like patient feedback, evidence of health needs, feedback from partners to try to determine how can we as partners across the whole of the system collaborate to support the best outcomes, health outcomes for people across our footprint. In this case, it's the whole borough. So community health and wellbeing plans are being developed across all of the districts in Leicestershire. I believe 2 of those have been approved already. Melton's has been busily being developed by partners over quite a period of time now. And before it's finalised, there's been a period of consultation with partners. And we wanted to make sure that as part of that consultation process, you as a committee had an opportunity to have a say and have an input into the things that matter, so they can be sense checked against what the colleagues working on this have found. And there's an opportunity then to shape the final iteration of the document before it goes for consideration by Cabinet. So I'll hand to my colleagues in a moment, but just before I do, I just wanted to set out what those next steps would be. So your feedback this evening would be collated by Advait and Aisha, who are part of a working group, and they would then take those comments into consideration when they develop the final draft of the Community Health and Wellbeing Plan. I've spoken with the chair and the vice chair and agreed then that what happens as a result of your comments would be shared back with this committee through an update at a future meeting as part of your work programme update. And then we would be aiming to take the final community health and wellbeing plan to the September meeting of the Cabinet to ask for their endorsement. And really importantly, this is an endorsement of the priorities and the commitment to work together, because this is not Melton Borough Council's plan and it is not for this council to deliver alone, but we have a really important part as part of that. So that would be the proposal. And the final thing I will say is what this does present is a really new opportunity actually for us as a district council to link in directly with the Health and Wellbeing Board. And we've not had that to this extent before. So if there are things that we can't solve at a local level, if there are particular challenges at a local level that we need to make sure the Health and Wellbeing Board are aware of, we have an opportunity to feed those through. But similarly, if we have some examples of really good practice or things that are, could be replicated elsewhere, it's our opportunity to showcase those also. So it's an opportunity I'm really keen for us to make the most of. So I shall stop there if that's okay. I'll hand to Advait and Aisha, and then we welcome any questions and feedback from you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Chair, for switching the agenda item around. Appreciate it. Okay, so as Michelle mentioned, the national policy context around integrated care systems has helped us kind of move to this planning approach. But I wanted to just we've mentioned in the paper as well, we talk about system, place and neighbourhood. But for the benefit of yourselves, when we talk about system planning, we're talking about a footprint of 1 million people across LL&R. When we're talking about place, we've got the joint health and wellbeing strategy of the county. So we're talking around about 250 to 500,000 people. But this plan here is the plan for Melton Borough and the residents of Melton Borough specifically, and it's neighbourhood level focused. So as Michelle said, in recognition of the need to really look at things at a local level and have a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down plan sometimes. This planning context, is important to stress that we have working on an evidence-based, which absolutely throughout the journey of our development of this plan is underpinned through a collaborative partnership approach based on evidence, insights from the local population through a number of mechanisms, which I'll touch on. And that really helping us to develop that local plan for Melton Borough. And as Michelle rightly said, this isn't a plan of an organisation. This is a plan for the population of Melton Borough and within its and on and around its borders. So, we have a working group. So when I say collaboration and partnership, we have a working group that's been at the helm of the development of this plan that we're presenting to you today. In that working group, we have colleagues from the ICB, so the Integrated Care Board. So I'm Advait Chef, I'm a planning manager in the strategy team. We have our transformation colleagues, we have our colleagues from public health, we have our colleagues from social care at the table, we have our primary care network also at this working group that's been developing this, active together at the county level. We have Dave who's involved. So we have a partnership forum where this development has taken place over the last year and a half, so to speak. And that's been the central driving force of this. However, what we have done, so it's important why this plan is in place actually as well. So we talked about the local nature of this, but what we're trying to do and what we hope we're asking your support to tell us and support us is, have we understood the local needs? And we think this tells us the local needs of the local area based on the evidence, based on what people have told us. And what we're trying to understand is not only the variation across England, but the Midlands, but within the area. You're a rural area. We know that. We recognise that as part of this, and the partnership have recognised that. So we understand that there is likely to be, and the plan shows that there is variation within Melton that we can address and make improvement. It's a population-based plan to drive improvement locally. It's important I stress that. This is all at the heart of this plan is the local population of Melton Borough. And also the plan, as Michelle alluded to earlier, it's to inform, allow us to inform, and you guys and the residents here, to inform, influence and respond to the joint health and wellbeing strategy for the county from within the local area. So it's not just about, it gives you a channel, gives the local population a channel to influence and feed in to wider developments at a place and even a system level, in which perhaps traditionally it may have been, that opportunity may not have been that clear, whereas this, plan gives us that opportunity, and the next arrangements will give us that. So I wanted to really be clear on why these and why we're doing this. So when I say, and it's an evidence-based approach, we've used data, needs analysis data, but it's not just data driven. We have used health data, we've used public health data, social care, locally available data from our colleagues here at MBC, insights from the local population through surveys that we've done to understand what people have told us, workshops with professionals who work in the area regularly and operational staff to understand how they feel about some of the things that are happening in the local area. And we've triangulated that with a discussion and a refreshed, formerly known as the Helping People Partnership Board, which you may be aware of, is now forming into the Community Health and Wellbeing Partnership for Melton Borough. And that was reformed in January of this year. And we undertook a discussion with them as well. So I just wanted to highlight that the priorities that you see in this paper, which I'll touch on, are drawn from a range and triangulated range of information and a range of stakeholders to get us to the point that we've come to today. So we now present this to you, the work that we've developed here, and there's a few comments that have come up about the need in the area. Now, this plan absolutely recognises the growth that we're going to see in the area in Melton. Councillor Gordon, you're absolutely spot on. 45%, in older people's population, and we absolutely recognise that in this plan, and we have to plan for that now to have an impact in the next 4 or 5 years. And that's an important point, that this is a strategic plan that gives us the direction. It will be the action plan, as Councillor Evans alluded to earlier, about the so what and how will we get to get there, and I'll come on to how we'll achieve some of that. But this is based on local needs and evidence. So hopefully you've seen some of this, and it gives the strategic direction for the next 5 years. That's our aim for this. That doesn't mean there won't be new priorities, or there may not be. We won't review this. We will review this. It's a living document. However, we recognise that we must also agree a strategic direction to get traction on some of these and greater collaborative support on these. So in terms of the priorities for Melton Borough, you see 22 in there. So there's 22 overarching priorities which we know that are areas of need based on the information that we've seen and we've analysed, and from what people have told us. I want you to rest assured that whilst we may have highlighted in the plan 5 that you can probably spotlight, that's in recognition that if we try to target all in one go, we're going to struggle as a collaborative or on our own. And what we've done as a group, we further surveyed our stakeholders as part of the working group to really help us to understand and rank the top priorities that we should spend our effort in the next couple of years on a collaborative basis to deliver and enhance the improvement that's already been made. So improvements will already be being made in some of these areas. I only want to stress that, through the joint health and wellbeing work in the county. However, what this gives us is a further opportunity locally to take that even further together in partnership. And if we can work using our collaborative might, which, there is a real good partnership ethos in Melton Borough. And I'm confident that we can take that even further with support from yourselves, the local population, and the professionals that work in the local area. So the 5 priorities that we're presenting to you today are the priorities that are deemed at the moment the initial top ranked priorities, but I don't want you to feel that the other priorities in there are not of value. They are. They'll be continually reviewed, and we'll ensure we're working on the most important at the time. But we need to focus on our energies and be clear on where we're focusing that. So the first priority area is supporting expectant mothers with breastfeeding initiation and prevalence. We know from the evidence base that there's a challenge across the county, but in Melton specifically. You've also got a maternity unit, so there's a real scope to do some work locally. Your second priority is to develop and embed a mental health neighbourhood offer, a local offer. We have recruited locally. Aisha, there's some sterling work there. We've got local Morag Tyler, who now works in the local area. But we want to embed that, and you mentioned earlier, Councillor Evans, about what does that look like? And that's the work we're going to do to understand what does it look like when it's embedded? What do we want it to look like? What does improvement really look like for mental health in the local area? And we know that's a priority. Prior to COVID, during COVID, and it's not got any worse. Any better at the moment. Cost of living hasn't helped. So we know that's a big priority for Melton and the borough, and we've made progress already with partners and Aisha and team. The third priority that we want to tackle our delivery efforts on collaboratively through the group that we've arranged is empowering residents to access preventative and self-care approaches, including digital. Prevention is a real key area for the borough, and I hope that comes clear in the plan. We understand from the work that we've done that there are some complex needs in the area, and for those with long-term conditions. Not only those that are on the older people's spectrum, as you may expect. There's actually a working age cohort. Data, we've looked at that. What we're doing about the working age that will then become older in the future, and that's where we need to focus some of our energy. That doesn't mean we won't focus on that, but we've got to help the people perhaps that are now working, but then in 5 or 10 years' time will be over 65, and prevent some of that illness and help them to look after themselves where possible and where we can, because there are many resources available to the population of Melton, and we can support people navigate that to help them look after themselves where possible. But prevention is massive, and that goes for smoking cessation. We've got healthy eating, the frailty agenda you talked about, links in the physical activity, and then you couple that with having multiple disease or conditions. That's why prevention is absolutely in this plan, and it will be a key theme and delivery theme. Our fourth priority for the borough is preventing falls through supporting those at risk of hip fractures. We know people across Leicestershire, and actually in fact LLR, there's a challenge with falls, but we also know in Melton people are breaking their hip, fracturing their hip as a result of those falls, and the only place you go for that, you can end up in hospital. So again, we prioritize that. The working group in partnership have prioritized that as an absolute area. When you add the older population that's projected to grow, we have to start working better and closely and improving that in readiness for now, but also the future. And then the fifth one, and I'll make a point in a minute. I think some earlier points are really helpful, but integrating health and wellbeing teams and other local community support. I mean, Melton's got an absolutely fantastic community support offer. You've got food banks, you've got support groups. How do we work together more collaboratively with health as well? It's about health partners, our primary care network, evolving into a more integrated culture of working and operationally. So there are kind of 5 priorities that we've come to in terms of the top ranked priorities for delivery over the next few years. And as part of that 5th priorities, there is it's about aligning the way we work in a culture. Melton Borough has an excellent culture of working together in partnership, but we can take it further, I think. And nationally, there's real evidence around new models of care and how they can support and deliver improvement and keep people out of hospital and keep people in the community and safe. And that's some things that we will look at as part of that. I hope that's enough for myself on that. Aisha, is there anything to add?
So I don't really have a huge amount to add to that, just to add, because Advait's done that in quite some detail. I think just to reassure members, what's different about this plan is the ownership of the plan. We've not had a collaborative approach at this level before. We've talked about collaboration before, but actually having something on this at this level, we're already starting to see the benefits of this. Advait's mentioned we've already started working on the community neighbourhood Melton mental health offer. We've actually already recruited, and that's actually a pure collaboration recruitment. It's paid for and employed by the Integrated Care Partnership, but it's actually based in Melton, delivering through the Community Support Hub and through Melton on a matrix management basis. So that gives you some reassurance on the fact that it is a sort of true collaboration level. Advait mentioned the 22 priorities. Again, I think, and he mentioned after those 22 priorities, it doesn't mean that the others don't matter, but we've selected the 5 that's based on evidence, that's data-led and based on consultation. And I think it's actually quite timely because it links back to the earlier discussions you've had when you discussed the Scrutiny work programme, which is it's great to have all these priorities. Are they deliverable? Are they realistic? Are they pragmatic? So that's how we have to basically base that on, is making sure that it's deliverable. And then I think I'm just going to make one final point, which is that reassurance that this is a truly neighbourhood-based community health and wellbeing plan, because we've got a priority that's focused purely on integration with our community support hub, which is something that's very unique to Melton, and that kind of gives that indication that it is very, very Melton based and based on the district footprint.
Thank you very much for those presentations. Before I open it up to discussion and debate and questions, I mean, it did strike me, particularly when we're summarising the 5 priorities, that without an overarching partnership across various aspects, not just of the public services, but also the private economy of this borough as well, some of the aspirations on health might be very difficult to achieve. I just went through it very quickly. If the main causes or a cause of mental health problems is the cost of living crisis, the difficulty people have making ends meet, young people getting anxious about the fact they can't access learning because the local college is shut down, the health approach might not be effective, or hip fractures might occur less frequently if the Highways Authority were better at maintaining pavements and road. So there is an interrelationship, and I think it's important, therefore, that we're part of this approach to the extent that we can influence those various things. So I very much welcome the approach that's been taken as a start, without minimising the challenges of actually resourcing and delivering on all of the areas covered. So just a few opening comments. Would committee members like to either ask questions or make observations on the report?
Thank you very much for the report. You were talking about healthy lifestyle, healthy living, healthy eating, and then you talked about a food bank. I have to say a food bank is the least healthiest place where you can get food. It fills your stomach, but it's no nutrition. It's processed food. So that doesn't help healthy lifestyle.
Advait, just sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Advait was talking about the food bank in the context of Melton having that multi-agency approach. And the food bank is kind of not operating in isolation. We recognise that there's an emergency need for the provision of food due to the cost of living crisis, but at the same time, we have a unique structure available that allows us to access wider wraparound support that isn't focused on just delivering that emergency food. People are in that situation because there are other causes attached to that. And what we have here is this sort of that unique wraparound support that we have. I don't know if that was the right context.
That is right.
Yeah. Can I get back to that? Because I run the food bank, and there is the food bank supplies. We do it. If I send them anywhere else, mental health groups, anything else, there's nothing there. They've got to wait months and months to be seen. I have clients that are suicidal and are on the waiting list for months. So that doesn't work joined up, does it? I
I can come back to you. We can talk if you wanted to give us any individual cases, but I do know that obviously there is a massive challenge because there's a lot of mental health issues and limited capacity. But in terms of the work that goes on at Phoenix House, they look at alternative options, what provision we can provide, and challenging some of our partners. But if there's any individual cases of people waiting very long lengths of time, please do come back to me and I'll take those individual cases up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, both of you. I agree with some of the priorities that you've mentioned that should be the top 5. I think there's some good ones in there. I think the ones which people actually need help for, such as sort of aids and adaptations type things, trying to keep people at home as opposed to hospital. That's what a lot of people like and call for. I think when we're trying to make people healthy, I personally don't think that should be one of our top priorities, in the sense that if you want to try and stop people, being unhealthy and to stop smoking, I think you can do that through like social media, adverts on TV, etc. And I have to say, my personal view is that's all you can really do, because I think if people want to access, treatment for their own health needs and issues, they can. I think they can access that, wherever they live around the country. I don't think we should be trying to force people to try to, actually stop doing that. It's a good idea to be healthy. I'm more for it, but ultimately, I think it comes down to the actual individual person to actually make that choice. What I think should be one of the priorities, the top 5, is that, certainly for my years on the council, and I speak to quite a few residents, and even on the campaigns when I've been trying to get elected and everything, and they pretty much everyone says to me, we've got to have like an urgent care centre in this town. I mean, if you've got if you just break your arm, break your leg, or some other sort of urgent sort of system, I think you've got to go to an A&E in, either to sort of like Leicester or Nottingham, which is one is 15, 16 miles away, one's about 23 miles away. It's too far to go. And obviously the current NHS crisis, you have to wait about 6 hours in A&E for that sort of thing. And, I think, people ultimately, I think if you could just try to, sort of like change the system, if you like, and try to get these urgent bits done, these sort of like semi-urgent things. I mean, I think there's other talk about, really, I suppose, sort of how do you define urgent, sort of like which things would you actually include actually being urgent? I've said some of them, like after, sort of if you break your arm, legs, your bones and that. And if you have quite a big cut or something, and, it just needs to be fixed with some stitches or something, I think those sorts of things. But I think we can have to talk about that in time. But I think, that's what people all say to me. Another thing people say to me, as well as which I have to agree with them, is that the whole hospital system around the whole town is very disjointed. I think we only offer sort of a few bits and bobs here and there. If you've got a problem with your eye, something, and you need more care with your eye and more treatment, you have to go to one of the big hospitals, and people said to me they have to travel a long way, etc. And another thing as well is, people say to me as well that, I don't think they drive anymore, that age group, that's other councillors have said this earlier on tonight, over 65, sometimes don't want to, can't drive anymore. And, I think they could do something a bit closer, etc. If you had a taxi to Mount Hospital from around the town or the borough, it'd be cheaper than having to get a taxi to the other parts of where people go to A&Es and that. So, yeah, I'd say I'd certainly think the person, in my view, is that the top 5 priority should be having an urgent care centre. But I think the other 4 I'd keep, but I'd certainly axe try to make people healthier. Yeah, thank you.
Gordon.
Yeah, when you brought up about trying to help people to stop smoking, and I'm going to include people that drink to excess and people that take drugs and everything. Sometimes, not with everyone, but sometimes it could be an issue in their past that they're trying to deal with. And sometimes it can be loneliness and not knowing what to do. So they go to, to drink or what have you. And I think sometimes we have to get to the core issue of why people are doing this. And, you know, and I had somebody some time ago, it's going back a number of years now, and he said if it wasn't for the drugs, he would have committed suicide. He said the drugs stopped him from committing suicide. Now, I'm not saying this is with everybody, it's just with some of them. And I think we have to try and find those people as well that have these core issues, and it could be something from their childhood, it could be something that was recent, it could be anything, and it could even be loneliness, as I say. But obviously we still have to help the other ones that are just doing these things just to have a social life. If they think that with people that smoke, they smoke. You know, if they're lonely, they go out, and people are drinking, their friends are drinking, and they start drinking. So, but I do think that there's different issues we have to look at when it comes to this kind of thing. Thank you.
Councillor Thwaites.
Thank you. I just want to actually reinforce what Councillor Lumley was saying, in the fact that I think one of the opportunities of, I think you called it the support hub model, and we have got a lot of things in Melton or around the borough that could be actually used or utilised much more. The amount of times, I'm sure we've all got experience of either residents or family that, let's say, have been sent to Leicester for an X-ray rather than suggesting Melton. And when you said, well, why do I have to go to Leicester? Why can't I go to Melton? The answer was, well, yeah, I suppose you can. And I think that becomes an attitude. That's not a big change in what we're doing. It's an attitude, or you know, especially say from Oakham or from any of the outlying areas, using Melton or the facilities we've got now in Melton or in Oakham, using those better, rather than going with this centralised model of Leicester or Nottingham being the only places that you go to, or that's your first choice. For a lot of the ageing population that we talked about, making that transport to go to a centre of a town is even more difficult. So I think for me, one of the priorities should be, how do we actually utilise the stuff we've got, rather than thinking about new things, and that should be one of the priorities.
I agree.
This just by way of clarification, really, because it is touched on in section 4 of the executive summary, and you're going to say that that it's largely based on district footprints, the plan, which is very laudable. However, there are outlying areas where that plan or the district plan doesn't actually fit the health plan area. For instance, there are areas in and around that belong to this council that service their health from Lincolnshire. And I can speak personally that if I want a glaucoma appointment, I have to go to Louth, which is even further away than Nottingham and Melton. But nevertheless, the question is, how have we picked up these outlying areas that are not associated with Leicester Health, that are associated with other areas within the health community?
Thank you. That's a really good point, actually. And when we move to the next phase into the delivery, you know, we will need to consider those populations that are impacted or that are in scope of the improvements and delivery. And at that point is where we need to consider, where are the residents? Are they, you know, whether in the centre of Melton Borough or on the periphery, on the border? You know, I think the information we have as a collaborative will help us to identify where those people are. We shouldn't be restricted if they're on the border or there or thereabouts. The other thing I would say is, as a system, you know, and I can personally kind of say we have links, strategic links with Lincolnshire, South Castine, for example, Northwest Anglia Foundation Trust. I'm giving you some examples to illustrate that what we will have to do and through our delivery, and when I say we, the collaborative, you start to understand where we might need to, in the context of the priorities for Melton Borough, where we need to strengthen some of those partnerships with people on the border to make sure that people don't fall through the net. You know, and that's where the integrated working comes back in that priority, because in a way that's a key enabler to the delivery of a lot of this plan in many ways, and underpins improvement. And that integration is within, but also, you know, in and around the borders. And as Michelle alluded to earlier, there are 7 plans around the district from an LLR perspective, but I have no doubt whether they're called the same thing or not isn't really the issue. I have no doubt there will be arrangements of and integrated ways of working on these other areas around Melton Borough. What we have to do is, when we move to the next phase, is start to understand them. Have we got links into them operationally? Do the right people know, so people don't fall through the net just because they're in or around the border? I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's just that this makes great play on talking to people, understanding people's needs, and quite rightly so. The question I would ask you, have you understood the people that's on the periphery? And I'm not talking of small villages, I'm talking of large conurbations, probably the 2nd or 3rd largest conurbation. I'm not going to mention the name because people get tired. No. People get very tired of me mentioning that name. However, one of the 2nd or 3rd largest conurbations in this district, then I don't see it in this paper. And to me, that's a real problem, because I don't think we totally understand the needs of the rural body.
So Bottisford, I don't know the page number, but I'll give you an example of where we do know what's happening. So veterans, let's just take a look at veterans. I'm only picking this up, so I'd be sad if I knew the whole thing. But, you know, Bottisford has 5.2% of its population. Just find it, because I'd like to tell you. You've asked, you know, a perfectly reasonable point you made, but I want to give you some assurance that we understand some of this. So, for example, Bottisford, Harby and Croxton Kerrial has 5.2% of its population, constituent population, being a veteran. The LLR proportion is 3.3%. So already we know that in that area there that I've just mentioned, that's higher than the average across LLR. So that shows an example of why we're doing plans like this. That's on page 33, but that gives there are some services that are being developed around armed forces, or to support armed forces, veterans, etc. But what I'm highlighting is we understand some of that, and as we move to the next stage of delivery, we then have to start looking at unpicking that and how those people fall into scope. But that's an example of where that's a higher figure than, you know, the LLR average, but we've picked that up through the work in this plan, and we recognize that that's actually a higher percentage than the overall average. And therefore, when we move to our actions, we also know about veterans having multi-morbidities, mental health problems due to their unique occupation. I also do some work on the armed forces. So when we move to the delivery, these information that we have will help us to ensure that we're targeting the right populations. I hope that gives you an element of assurance, should I say.
Majority of people in Bottisford use GP services. One's based in Long Bennington, which is completely out of the county, and the other one is in Bottisford, but they're both run by South Kesteven. Well, I used to know as PCTs, but now it's all changed. Can you influence those areas, those GP practices within this model? Because if you can't, then again, we're left out. I need some assurance around the influence that this report can have on GP practices that are not in your catchment area. Does that make sense?
That's something we have to, and you've made the comment rightly, we have to, I probably can't give this assurance at this moment in time, because
I'm not seeking assurance.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that this is the direction of travel for me. And if the paper ever came back and it wasn't in there, then I'd be perhaps more vociferous on the.
That's helpful. Well, we would need to take those populations into account as we move to delivery, and not forget about those populations that perhaps served elsewhere.
I mean, I would suggest that that's certainly is, you know, the first specific item of feedback from the committee. There's concerns about the ability to make this plan work in certain areas of the borough, which actually have the health services provided from outside of the county of Leicestershire and Rutland. So that's really helpful, I think. Any other, I don't know, Tim, I think you were indicating.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to Councillor Lumley. Obviously, I was ward councillor with Councillor Lumley, and I've heard on the ward as well. Obviously, provision for a new surgery. Also, picking up on Councillor Thwaites, we have got a hospital in the town, and I don't know whether he's been there yet. Is it underused or? Oh, you're one or two of you. Okay, fair enough. But yeah, it's fits in the town. Obviously, if people want to see a consultant, can't consultants come to Melton on a certain day if it's eye specialist one week or whatever. It just might help. You know, it seems like a big dinosaur. I don't know quite what to do there. Yeah, but is it underused, or can we use more of it? Make it into surgery there as well. You know, that's all I want to say. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other, Councillor Evans?
Well, here I come again. You know, I just put, and I hear the comments of other people, and maybe I'm just a grumpy old man, but, and I probably am. My wife says I am, so she's probably right. She's right. Look, as far as I'm concerned, first of all, thanks for all the work you're doing, because it's not an easy industry to be in at the moment. We all know where the NHS, etc., is at the moment. In Melton, and even the rural areas, but mainly in Melton, I agree with what you've just said, Tim. Councillor, shouldn't say that, Councillor Webster. Melton Hospital, I've been in it. It's like the Mary Celeste. We're not joining up. We're lacking a surgery. We've got a hospital that's not being used properly. And it's I'll use these words, it's a disgrace. It's just wrong. And the whole thing, root and branch, needs to be looked at. I know that the performances, for instance, I go to Long Clawson surgery, and I have to thank the pressure that our officers put on that, because it's transformed thanks to a lot of the work that Michelle and other people did and actually getting these things can be sorted. But my view is there is fundamentally things that need to be addressed, and one of them, and I know Bottisford has a few issues. I've spoken to a few residents there. That's where our priorities should be. We should be looking at the statistics of these surgeries, our hospital, and putting a big finger at the NHS and say, what are you doing? Because to me, they're not joined up. They're not joining up the dots. They're not getting a coherent sort of message to the residents that is clear. And I hate to say this, sometimes when I look at all these layers within the NHS, I, as a councillor, find them incredibly complicated, which these interacting bodies. I hate to think what a resident thinks of them all. And, you know, when you look at all these mental health, and they all seem separate. And to me, that's incredibly confusing, let alone to our more vulnerable residents who need that. And it's just, to me, still a long way from being where we want. And our energy, in my opinion, and that your energy should be addressed at, just keep hammering home that we need our GPs to be valued and sorted, because even in Bottisford there's still issues, I know, and I wouldn't even talk about Melton. And the hospital, I think, is awful, because every time I've been in there twice, and it's like, well, it's like Parkside officers. I'd to say, sorry, Michelle, but it is. There's no one there, and it's an underused resource all the way around. And I just find it staggering that we have such facilities under the NHS, to be honest. And to me, I know, unfortunately, Melton Borough Council can't do what it really would do if it had the power, which is sort these issues out and sort them out within a year or two. but I'm a very, as Michelle knows, a very impatient person. And I'm always looking. And I agree also with Councillor Atherton that, you know, I've seen the food bank and I wish Melton could help get fresh vegetables, etc., to the more vulnerable, because at the moment that's not happening. All these guys are getting, guys and girls, I should say, is tinned food, and that isn't helping them at all. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gordon.
Yes, talking about St Mary's Hospital, I think it depends what time of day perhaps you go. But when I go there, which isn't very often, but I do get there sometimes, and the place in reception is full of people, and there's an X-ray room, there's rooms when you can have blood tests, and there's I'm not sure about anywhere else around St Mary's Hospital, but I'm sure there's some empty rooms, obviously, but there's also along the way, one of the buildings is with the physiotherapists, and there's lots of people in there having this treatment. So it is being used, but it must be what time of day you go. So I don't quite know when you went, but when I go, there's usually a lot of people, you know, waiting for treatment and stuff. And yes, it seems to me like it is used. Thank you.
I mean, I'm not going to recount an anecdote about my personal medical program, but I have been to Melton Hospital in the last year, and after phoning 111 and got, you know, found a very helpful senior nurse practitioner hiding behind the curtain there on a Saturday afternoon. So there certainly are accessible health services, but they're a bit of a mystery as to how you normally would use them. Can I just say, you know, from the chair, I think there's a definite theme coming out here, which I'm getting the feel there's a big consensus around, and that is it's not hostility, I don't think, to, you know, the plan at all, but it is a recognition that the state of health services, whether it's the GP surgery or the hospital or others in Melton, shall I say, yeah, confidence of the local population in them is very low. And I think that inevitably has an impact on their willingness to engage with other initiatives. So I think, you know, part of our feedback to on this report should be that addressing those issues, and it's you know, partly getting a second surgery, keep banging that gong, but also, frankly, why is Latham House, when compared to other surgeries, apparently performing less well? It's a sort of elephant in the room, doesn't really get addressed, and it's not addressed in this report, but it certainly has an impact. I think all of us, whether through our representing our residents in our various wards, or just with our friends, families, etc., within the borough, it's very unusual to hear a favourable view expressed of the state of health services in Melton, and that inevitably is going to impact on the engagement over any other initiatives. So I think it should be part of what we prioritise, as well as using the, you know, understanding what is in the town, in particular in respect to the hospital. So I think that's the sense of where this discussion has been taken as, and should form part of our formal feedback if the committee agree with that. I'm not closing the debate, I'm just trying to put that thread together. Yeah.
It's just, I think something I've never really got, I did get once, but I think it would be incredibly useful for councillors. I know that from every GP surgery, there's statistics that the CCS or whatever they call get. I think that's what we need to see. We need to see where our surgeries are performing well, where they're performing badly, because in a way, I'm speaking really as a layperson just from not having the statistics, but we need to know, for instance, how many Latham House, how many people, how many patients have they got per GP, and how often, how quickly do they get in, and all the rest of it. I think it's important for us as councillors to know how bad it really is. How bad is Bottisford, you know, compared to the rest and all the rest of it? Because to me, I'm a scientist, facts are the important thing. I know we also have got opinions, and I know that most people in Melton scream when I mention the NHS to them or Latham House, but I think it would be helpful if we could actually have facts behind those statements.
just to add to my comments, I know when I speak to Councillor Carton, he's the councillor for Asserby, he was saying that their surgery, sometimes they operate on a very sort of tight leash with only sort of one GP there and one sort of other practitioner there. And any overspill has to, probably has to come into Melton. So that's a bit of an issue there. That's not really utilised properly, Asserby, according to the reports from him. But just another thing as well is that obviously with a hospital being in my ward and Councillor Webster, what was disappointed at quite a few years ago is that part when you go towards the traffic lights crossroads, that's now going to be apartments, and that it's just a shame that the NHS didn't actually decide as a plan back in the day, which I'd emailed to every of your colleagues, by the way, just to try to expand a plan for expanding services now, but now there's only little space now for expansion, which is a shame. But just another thing else I wanted to pick up on, which I don't think we seem to talk about a lot, is that obviously it's been every winter, probably about the last 30, 40 years, every time there's a harsh winter, I think you get ambulance waiting times are very, very high. It's particularly bad the last few years, and now it's now just not, it isn't just in the winter, it's now all year round. You get severe waiting times. Have we actually got an ambulance station that is actually close by? I just want to ask that because I know we are in the whole borough, we are in a very area where we're about 15, 20 miles from the nearest town, etc. And it's just, obviously, it is a concern when you ring 999, you have to wait a long time for an ambulance, say. But is there any other talk about trying to, I mean, this what we're saying now has also been brought up by people in my ward on the election campaign in the last few years, but is there any talk of trying to combine police, ambulance and the fire into one place, which would actually save money, perhaps? Because I know the minute everywhere is sort of on its own areas and on its own sort of like budgets, etc. And that could be a big way to try to cut times and costs, etc. Just as well, if if you're an MP, as in sort of a member of Parliament, if you want to actually scrutinise NHS in Parliament, you can really criticise certain bits and bobs, and action is taken, especially if you're in the cabinet and you're Prime Minister. But I just find when you're a councillor, say in this part of the country, you're councillor on a small district council or you're a county councillor, there isn't really any part of that council's remit where you can actually scrutinise the NHS. It's very much as it is now, that someone comes in like yourself, very kind of you, and it's very much like sort of like, please can you give us your ideas and thoughts on the local services. And I think this is a really good thing to know what we're doing, and you're going to pass that back. But it's just a shame that we don't operate sort of like other countries do. I think it's Sweden or one of the sort of the like Scandinavian countries where every sort of like level of government have got real sort of health scrutiny. And if you want change in your local area, whoever is actually elected as a councillor type level can really change that. But at the minute, it's very much, it seems to be very sort of like centralised. In other words, I think what we say does go a long way, but ultimately things don't really change. But anyway, that's another time. Thank you.
No, I mean, I just want to thank you all. The comments, perfectly reasonable. I can understand where you're coming from. There's a couple of things there's a theme, obviously, I think we picked up on. We talked about urgent care, we talked about hospital provision, we talked about GPs. I think something that needs to be recognised that underpins this plan is transformation and change. And we talked a bit about using what we've got earlier. I understand that, but we also have to change and transform how we work, how we use our assets collaboratively, how we spend our money, how we resource things, because times change. So I think there's a level of transformation that we have to understand and expect. A part of that, and I mentioned at the start, and it's an important one because it's proven to work nationally and locally in areas, but what we need to do is more of it. And primary care networks is a good example of a new model of care. We talk about new models of care, keeping people in the community. So when, perhaps hospital for some of these things isn't the right place to go. Perhaps an urgent care centre, you made a really good point about coming up, but some of those services have traditionally been delivered in an urgent care centre, but actually could be delivered within the community, by other provision, if that makes sense. And that's something where the transformation has to come in, and will evolve some of that. But I just wanted to share that, so perhaps didn't give it enough. But the transformation and the change element to make improvement, will be needed, and we'll all have to support each other as a partnership in that journey, and make those adjustments. But I've heard you. I have my notes, and thank you for your views. And the other point about coming today, this isn't the end of it. You'll see me again, and we'll be back, because what we'd like to is to have your. I think someone made the. I think it's yourself. I can't remember, but it's a great phrase. We want that continuing constructive support from scrutiny from you to guide our delivery locally, because actually that's where we need your help as well as the local population. So this is a journey. It's a 5-year plan deliberately. So this isn't the last time this opportunity. And Michelle mentioned it earlier. Our role is to ensure that the local voice, and this is my role as well, is make sure the Melton Borough's voice through the delivery of this plan is conveyed and shared. If that needs to influence other things, we can at least make sure the voice and support the voice being heard. We can't change and control everything, but we can do that, and that's this new footprint and the way we're working should enable that. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm afraid we might not be quite finished, because I'm going to just say something in that respect, and particularly what you've just said, because I certainly understand that this is about change. This is about looking at new ways of supporting people in helping them to improve their health or create an environment in which that's possible. I think the point that certainly I was making, I think other members of the committee was making, is if you go to the general populace of the borough saying, well, this is our plan now and it involves change, and you're trying to change from a bad place, the engagement is not going to be as positive as it would be if they already had confidence in what they were currently receiving. That's the key issue. And it's a bit like having a football team and saying, well, we've got 11 rubbish players, we're going to bring in, our solution is to bring in 11 players of similar standing. That's how people might see it. And therefore, I think it is important that the current provision is, the stage of the current provision and its, effectiveness or not is addressed to enable this sort of plan to actually have some possibility of developing positively. So I think that was really the issue around that. Anybody else want to add to? No? Thank you very much. And you've had a long day here. I hope you have a safe journey home. Okay, so I'm sure Adam's captured all of the views expressed during that discussion, which I think didn't necessarily resolve everything. The vice chair is indicating we'd like a short break. Will people be happy just taking a short 5-minute break? Yep. Okay, we'll do that then. Okay, are we all ready to proceed? Okay, well, we go to item 6 on the agenda, which is a CCTV post-implementation review. And the Director for Housing and Communities, Michelle Howard, will present the report, supported by the Assistant Director for Customers and Communities, Aisha Rahman, and the Strategic Leader for Safety of Communities, David Walker, who's very patiently waited throughout the rest of the meeting for this item to arise. So shall I over to you, Michelle?
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. So just by way of background to this report, some of you will recall that last year there was a decision to invest in modernising our CCTV arrangements within the town. And this was based on the fact that the previous system was 26 years old, the technology was obsolete, and we had ineffective arrangements for monitoring. So we had quite a poor CCTV offer. So a project has commenced and concluded in terms of upgrading and improving not just the equipment, but also the monitoring arrangements and the maintenance of the cameras, and the whole arrangement is working much more effectively, and that is now operational. There was a request for a post-implementation review through the Scrutiny Committee, which we really welcome, and pleased to share with you around the details of how that project has been implemented, and how that's having an impact. And you'll see at Appendix A there is some information from Leicestershire Police in terms of the difference that the CE system is having already for them, and obviously they would be in possession of any data in particular around incidents, etc., that they collate, because they are police matters and not matters for us to necessarily be aware of. So I'm going to hand over to my colleagues Aisha and David in a moment to take you through some of the key steps in relation to sort of the project. But we've managed this as a project through our internal project management arrangements. So we have something called a helping people board internally. So colleagues have reported into there, and that's where we've had that oversight. The cabinet decision and the subsequent council decision gave us approval to enter into a partnership with Harborough District Council, and this was for monitoring using their existing control room infrastructure, and also for maintenance of the cameras. So that made sure that we could achieve better value for money effectively. And what I've just given you is hopefully has come around the room is just some information that I've extracted from the project documentation, which confirms the progress and the I guess give you some of the assurance about the way in which the project has been managed and implemented. I have to say, as an officer, it's a project I'm incredibly proud of our team for achieving. It was a long time coming. It was really, really needed. And to get it done as we have, I think has been positive, and there's always room for growth and further developments. And what I'm really proud to see is that already having that new system in place is enabling us to bring in more funding to grow that offer. And in a moment, I might come to yourselves, Aisha and David, to talk about the funding that the PCC has just awarded to us for some new technology and initiatives as a result. The other thing that was really positive for us is when council agreed the approach and the budget, we were able to then reduce the cost to this council by a further £15,000, and that was because the Police and Crime Commissioner agreed for us to use some of his funding towards a system. And so that was a really important part for us, because really crucially, this isn't a statutory service, it is a discretionary service, but it is a really important one, and it's one that we want to get right. The final thing I'll say before I hand over is that CCTV isn't and never will be the silver bullet. And Aisha would be really disappointed if I didn't mention that, but it's really important that we have realistic expectations about this. So we have a control room that is manned 24/7, 365 days a year. We have had the police in the control room to set what are known as tours. So they have identified from those cameras what they can see, what do they want to be looking at, where do they want those cameras to be moving to and viewing. What that doesn't mean is that they will see every incident as it unfolds. So we are really reliant on the public still to report incidents as they happen, or for the police or members of the public to let us know if they're aware that an incident has happened, because part of what we can do is access data and information from those cameras. And I just wanted to give you a live example of that. So we've had some increased antisocial behaviour issues at skate park recently, and they've been causing, quite rightly, huge levels of concern within the community. And having witnessed some of those incidents myself, I share those concerns. We do have a camera that covers that area, but clearly it's touring. What we've done as a response to those incidents is we have fixed the view of that camera for a period of time. So that gives us greater ability to monitor what's happening there. And there will be some changes to the equipment that we use there in time. The risk, of course, is that whilst it's focused on one area, we're not looking at the other areas, but we can be dynamic. We can try and look at hotspots, and we can develop and adapt as we go. But it isn't the perfect solution for detecting any crime that takes place within those areas. And I just wanted to make that that clear. So I'm going to stop there and hand over to colleagues to fill in the blanks, if I may, and then we just really welcome your comments and questions really on the project and any suggestions for where we go from here. So I'll hand over. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I think I'm just going to draw the attention to the table on page 4, which gives the comparison of what we used to have previously and compared to what we have now. But when looking at what we had previously, that was the sort of impetus for us to start looking at what we could have. We had a sort of maintenance contract that was no longer offering value for money. We were I think paying circa 8k per annum for a system where over half the cameras were not working, imaging qualities, faults, regular breakdown. We may as well not have had a CCTV system in place. And then basically the speed in which we've done that, I mean, it started with a process of benchmarking, some soft market testing of existing CCTV, what costs are associated with it. We did a full audit of existing infrastructure and then went through the relevant approvals process to do so. We obviously had to consider procurement, exemptions, contracts, how installation and implementation would take place, looking at what monitoring and maintenance arrangements, which led to us obviously working with Harborough District Council on that as well. So it was, and then obviously looking at the funding opportunities as well. So it was quite a complex piece of work managed as a project. It had to be managed as a project on that. And as Michelle said, I think I just want to reiterate, it's a sort of project and implementation that we are incredibly proud of, given where we are today with that. I think Michelle mentioned, as a result of that CCTV, we're now able to bring in further funding. One of those examples is a help point, which is a button. I might have to let David come in on that sort of technicalities, but it's a button that somebody can press if they feel at risk, and when they press that button it links them immediately to the monitoring and call centre. And what they can do is they can focus the camera, look at nearby perpetrators when that person feels that they're at risk. And that we were only able to apply for that as a result of us having this brand new CCTV system. So I think really that's all I've got on that. I don't know if there's anything I've missed, David, that you want to add to this before we open up for questions.
Just on the funding, we have had additional funding for an extra camera that will replace the Play Close camera that we currently have, which is a WCCTV camera, which was provided through Safer Streets a year or so ago. And that camera will then be repurposed for the help point. So the help point will sit in conjunction with the WCCTV, which is a wireless CCTV camera. And as Aisha said, it's mainly to target sort of the safer streets for women and girls, to make sure we've got safe spaces within our communities in the evening times. It can be accessed at any time of the day by anybody, but it's specifically targeted at that particular group of people. And, you know, we have worked in conjunction with the police and looking at appropriate locations for that to be implemented, and we have got one in mind. So once we've got that confirmed, obviously we'll be releasing that information further. The implementation of the camera on Play Close will be in the next couple of weeks. I'm led to believe. I've gone out to our provider today just to confirm dates, but it will be fairly imminent, I'm led to believe.
just wanted to add just one more thing is really before the CCTV full project, we were using mobile cameras that were not designed for permanent use to kind of fulfill the requirements of the permanent cameras. What we can do now is we've got a little bit of flexibility to be more dynamic, to be more responsive and proactive, where we've got hotspots in areas that we can focus some of our mobile deployable cameras on there as well.
Councillor Thwaites. Then Councillor Gould.
And thanks very much. I just want to congratulate you on the project. Yeah, I think it's brilliant to get it there. And what I'm going to say is not directly this project, but it's a generality which I may say over and over again in a lot of these scrutiny meetings. I think one of the things we're missing is saying what the original objectives are, and have we been successful against those. The talk you just gave me some of those, and that was brilliant to actually say that these were the objectives, this is the money we've saved, all those things, but those aren't actually stated because they're the things that we're being asked. So I think we can actually present these slightly better as well. There's things that could be said that are much more understandable when we're talking to residents or you're talking to residents, is to say that, yeah, we're trying to save money on the maintenance, we're trying to make sure we've got coverage. I think there's other things that we should be maybe aiming for, which is, are we actually saying we're going to cut the antisocial behaviour down by a percentage? I know that's really difficult to measure on all those things, but it's actually trying to make sure that we're guaranteeing, as the critical friend, which is the word I keep missing, are we getting value for money for our residents? And I think in this case, we can absolutely prove that, but we need to prove it slightly better. In a lot of the things that you've said are things that I would love to see in this report, and very plainly put, so that when we start a project, we've got some very clear 4 or 5 objectives, and this is how we've actually been successful at the end of it. And that could then be a very concise report that we can actually show people, that can see how we've actually delivered on our quest to deliver value for money. And we can celebrate that success then, which, you know, quite rightly should be doing now. But I think there's, like I said, there's things that we should, the objectives on this particular one is also saying, well, what are we looking for? Are we looking to prevent crime? Are we looking to be able to react to it so that we can actually then prosecute whoever, sort of thing? You know, what are those objectives within there? And therefore we can then say on a medium long-term basis, has that been successful? And going back to the original one, have we then got value for money? Because I think that's what we should be doing as a scrutiny committee.
That's a fair point, well made, and we'll certainly take it back for future scrutiny meetings. Yep.
Yes, now I think this help point button is brilliant when it comes to fruition. What I'm worried about is the charge of it, because there'll be a lot of vulnerable people that won't be able to afford it. What sort of help can we give them in that? I mean, I'm assuming there's going to be a charge. Hopefully there isn't. It would be great if it was free. For the button, the help.
So the whole
point
point is actually just one unit that's within the town centre. So it will look like a box, and it will sit on a lighting column. So it's not going to be something that's out in everybody's home or something of that nature. So when you're out and about, say in the nighttime economy,
yeah,
and you come out of a bar, for instance, but you feel unsafe on the street and you feel like you may be being followed, but you come across the help point, it's in the direction of traffic, of people. So you can go up to the help point and press a button on it. It's got a little camera inside the box, and there's a 2-way speaker. So you can have a conversation with the control room, and you can say, look, I feel unsafe, I feel I'm being followed. They can get your location, and then they can obviously look on the CCTV, and they can contact directly the police through the police radio and say, we've got a person who's potentially being followed. Have you got anybody in the area? And it can work in that way. So it's going to be one box at the minute. We might in future look to get more within the town centre, but currently it's just the one unit.
I think that is absolutely brilliant. And thank you for clarifying that for me. I wasn't sure how this was going to work, but yes, thank you. Okay.
Councillor Lumley.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say thank you to Michelle, Aisha and David for their hard work on this, because I know I've often contacted you all about different hotspots around my ward and over the years. What's going to ask was, if you've got these figures, great. If you haven't, don't worry, because I don't want to put you on the spot. But could you tell us which locations the fixed cameras are in the town area now, briefly, if you can? Did any go in the country park? Because I know that was increasingly an issue during the hours of darkness, where, you know, obviously there's no light and there's antisocial behaviour going on through there reportedly. Another thing, so just those two questions to begin with. Now I'm just going to say a general statement. Basically, what I'm for is, as opposed to fixed cameras, I'm actually for these ad hoc ones, which I'll contact you, David, often about. I know we've had some in my ward. Algernon Road car park's been one of them, and that's been. I know there's been a bit of a queue sometimes, hasn't there, for one. Are we, I think you've answered part of it anyway, but are we actually going to plan for more of these ad hoc ones? Because I know when I speak to different people, they do say that's a good thing. It's a way forward, and they can focus for 2 weeks on that area and see what's come about of it. But also as well is it's not just about the town area, it's also about the countryside as well, that also suffer from crime. And people, I know it's being advertised a lot more from the police that it's a big problem, rural crime, but still people think it's focused on antisocial behaviour in the town area, on pubs and clubs. But you know, I know crime in countryside is a really big thing now. So that's why I'm for ad hoc cameras being planted. So yeah, just another point as well. I believe there's police and crime commissioner funding that ends at the end of this month, and so we've got about sort of 3 days, 5 days or something. Are we applying for any money from that fund again for, say, more ad hoc CCTV cameras? But I realise it's very late in the day, and you might not see an email from him, and etc. Just another brief point as well. I'm going slightly off the subject, but with sort of like speeding being an issue all around the borough, I think you get obviously emails and phone calls about speeding. Is there any other money, instead of having cameras, but those sort of like flashing signs where it actually says you speed? Because I know they're very popular with people, residents. I think it's more of an actual psychological thing, that when you're driving and you're saying if you do about 34 and you go down, you actually go down to 30, it's a really good thing. Because I know what people say to me, they're anti-speed humps, they're anti any other road changes, because if ambulances to get by, police to in budget cause affects the whole time span and that. But they are for those flashing speed cams, so anything going on that direction would be a good idea. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Any other?
Do you want me to answer the question?
Oh, sorry, by all means, if you.
Okay. So the locations of the cameras, so they went on all the new cameras have gone on the current infrastructure, because it was seen as the best place to put them, because the fibre optics are in place. So we've got the 10 cameras within the town centre. I'll name you off the top of my head. We've got Burton Street, we've got 2 on Sherrard Street, we've got the Marketplace, we've got 2 on Nottingham Road, we've got 1 near Wetherspoons, we've got King Street. I think I've named near enough all of them. Yeah, so I think I've got all of them there. Like I say, there is the one going on Play Close soon as well. There will be, obviously, as the years progress, there will be opportunity to put cameras elsewhere as well, and we may do them in conjunction with maybe businesses in partnership with them, that we can put them on their existing premises and look to utilize that in the future. That's something we can explore. In regards to the mobile cameras, we do have mobile cameras. We only have a limited amount of them. Unfortunately, 2 of them have been vandalized of recent weeks, which is not helpful for us. We have recently acquired a camera specifically for our fly tipping hotspots as well, which is, it's covert but not covert, because we overtly advertise that we have CCTV in the area, but the camera isn't obviously obvious for obvious reasons. So we are putting that out, and that has been going out in a lot of our rural areas, as you'd expect. And with the mobile cameras, they can go out in any location within the borough, so we will utilize them in the rural towns as well. The country park, unfortunately, no permanent cameras have gone onto the country park. There will be, again, ad hoc. We would put the little mobile cameras out there. We did have a request earlier for some of the allotment users to go up there. Unfortunately, there was nowhere where we could attach the camera. It's just location dependent. It was quite tricky to get it in the places where it would have had the most benefit. We could have put it in a different area, but the likelihood of us capturing anything significant would be quite slim, I would have thought. So it is sometimes within the country park, the location is quite difficult, and unless we start to erect like posts to attach the cameras on, we may struggle in that particular area. But that's something that we can also look at in the future, really sort of looking at mobile cameras or more semi-permanent ones in the park, maybe in future years, I would think. In relation to the speeding type of stuff, I think that would probably sit with the county council to look at putting that infrastructure in place. And if you speak to your constituents and if they've got multiple complaints, they could put through to the county council, that would probably lay the foundation of them looking at implementing that sort of equipment.
Okay, Councillor Evans.
As Michelle knows, when I think something's not right, I say about, but when I think something's right, and I've spoken to the police about this, we got everything right. You get A+ for this. The police are delighted, absolutely delighted with what I saw a policeman smile. You get it right, you consulted, you've got the right sites, you've got everything. They obviously want more, they always will, but you've got the right vision. I mean, they say they're crystal clear, they can see what's going on, and you worked with the necessary authorities to get the right sites. This project to me is an A+ from the moment it started to the moment it's not ended, but hopefully at this stage it's brilliant. And I'd like to thank Michelle and all of the people involved for what they've done, because it was, to me, brilliant. And it may not be a silver bullet, but it's a pretty good one. And the main thing that also does, and this is an important point, is give our residents some confidence that they're safe, you know, in the town centre. And that's an important point not to forget. It's not just catching the bad guys, it's also the vulnerable people, as you said, David, and the rest being able to walk our streets with some confidence and know that they can do that from now on. And thank you very much for all our officers, and please pass it on all officers involved. Thank you, Michelle.
Any further comments, Councillor Webster?
Just one thing, Chair. You said you mentioned that you could put some additional cameras up eventually. Have you got some sort of plan on how many per year and that sort of thing, or how many more mobile cameras and sites and that sort of thing?
Immediate plans, no. But that'll be looking at consultation with members of the public when we go and speak to them in our engagement events, and if any hotspots. I would say no immediate. There may be scope for Beckmill area would probably be one of the areas I would like to have cameras up, because there is quite secluded path at the back of Beckmill, which I think would really benefit with a camera up there. So for me, if I could have an additional camera at the minute, it probably would be Beckmill.
Just to add that we do have to balance it with what funding we have available, because we have to apply for the funding for additional cameras. We have to consider how we're going to replace the cameras so that we're not faced with another situation where we've got cameras that are 26 years out of date. So it's a constant balancing act. And the other thing that we need to do is the community safety partnership. We do have to consult with them as well in terms of where we apply for the funding. So whilst we'd like to hope that we will be able to add to the cameras, we just need to make sure that we're doing sort of making sure we've got the balance right in terms of the funding that's available to us. I just want to go back to I know the silver bullet has been mentioned a couple of times. I guess I'm coming at it from the point of view that it doesn't take away responsibility from people to report the crimes. They have to report the crimes, and obviously what it then does is give the police, it's a tool for the police to be able to sort of focus in and get more prosecutions and successes as a result of that. So I guess that's what we mean from that point of view of having a silver bullet. And also what the CCTV gets us, it's obviously provides assurance of safety, it's a deterrent, but even better is it's given us it's brought us a lot of goodwill in terms of our relationship with the police and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. We've been able to actually putting more investment around deterrent type of stuff. So David mentioned the health point. We're also putting applications for things like convex mirrors, which allows you to see perpetrators if you feel at risk coming around the corner and things like that. So all of those things are sort of that snowball effect of being able to invest in that as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you said about putting a camera around Beckmore Court, we've had a lot of or police activity, if you like, around New Street over the last year or so, you know, and I know the police station is just at the bottom, but I was wondering, would it benefit having a camera there as well?
Yeah, quite possibly. I know some of the camera at the top of Windsor Street does cover onto New Street as well, so you will get it does go onto there, but yeah, there's probably angles that it's not going to capture. So in future, especially if we're looking at further help points, there might be something, because they come with a camera as well, and that we can look at getting the sort of mobile cameras up there as well. So yeah, that's definitely an option.
Thank you. Jim? Yeah.
Just one thing, you said you may be able to roll it out at some point, whether subject to funding, and I accept all that. When you do roll it out, will you consult with the whole of the council, the whole of the borough council, and not just the town? Because there are hotspots, as alluded to by other members. In fact, I know there's a nasty incident at the skate park. Well, there was, I know of another couple of nasty incidents, and that could benefit from at least a transient camera or a permanent one. So would you consult with a wider group rather than just the town?
So as part of some of this, the CCTV also came as a result of consultation that we did when David and I first took over. We looked at the action plan that we had, the Community Safety Partnership, and we did invite a wide range of partners as well as parish councillors. What we would look from you as members is when we do those consultations, please encourage sort of parish council involvement and other representatives from across the borough, because a lot of that has been based on consultation. I think, was there anything else on there? But yeah.
I think I can absolutely guarantee that this parish council that I represent, I'm on the parish council, will respond this time. So thank you.
Thank you. I think the other thing just to say is that when funding becomes available, external funding, for example, through the Police Inquiry Commissioners, sometimes there might be funding rounds that are really relevant to parish councils. And there's a real opportunity there to sort of link in if a particular area or a particular parish has an aspiration about anything like this. Please do come and talk to us, because there may be a way that we can link things together. So, whilst this project has started on really trying to stabilise and improve what we have in the town, there is nothing to prevent its sort of wider distribution, but that would need to be done in a managed way. And I did hear that there might be some future funding rounds that we actually may not be able to access ourselves, but other organisations such as parish councils might. In an area that I've worked previously, we had a very similar model where you had a sort of town CCTV network, lots of councils being monitored by one partner, because there's one infrastructure there, and we know you've got their resources in there, and then it linked out to parishes much further down the line, but then it had the kind of the established framework in place. So never say never. As Archie says, please do link with us, because our plans will only ever be as good as the feedback you give us, because we don't know what you know in your communities. So please do link with us. Thank you.
Can I just say as well, the PCC are actually got a workshop for people to how to put in a successful bid. So that's actually on the 8th of August, and it'll be here at Parkside. Yeah, so if you guys want to attend to that, it'll be really beneficial, I think. All right.
Okay, I've just got a couple of questions or points to make. I also like to pick up on what Councillor Evans said, because I think we'd all want to endorse his comments around the success of this project and acknowledge the work that's been done. I would only want to put one caveat on it. I always worry when we look at things like this, that we can send off the wrong message about our town. So as a man of an age, I'm not going to reveal, but I have a bus pass. I regularly and very comfortably find myself in Melton of an evening and feel perfectly safe. I think we shouldn't exaggerate. We should acknowledge that we've got areas of difficulty and particular times and particular locations, but we shouldn't exaggerate the idea that Melton is an unsafe town. So I just wanted to make that point. On the actual project, there's a couple or three things I wanted to ask. There's a fine balance between using CCTV to catch people, but preferably using CCTV as a form of deterrence. Now I know I did, and when Michelle briefed myself and the vice chair on this report, one of the things we touched on was the signage, you know, basically saying to people, watch out, you're on CCTV, and I think that is being looked at. But one of the interesting things I encountered in the recent elections was walking down driveways and suddenly hearing a voice saying, you know, smile, you're on camera. And being a politician, of course, I put my best smile on and looked at the camera. But it made you acknowledge. I wonder whether there's any scope at some stage for using audio alerts that could actually prime people to think, I better, you know, watch how I'm behaving here, whether it's fly tipping or the antisocial or whatever. So I think it's an interesting avenue to explore, and we'd ask that maybe that could be looked into. The second is, it says in the report that you know, the plan is to, in about 5 years' time, to start looking at replacing cameras, so we're not hit with one big hit in one go. But 5 years is a long while in terms of technology. So I think it's important that the future proofing, so we don't end up where we were with the old system, actually acknowledges 5 years from now, the technology may be very different, and we should be open as a council to using the best, both in terms of effectiveness and cost effectiveness available, rather than simply saying we're going to replace like for like. So I think that should maybe go back as a bit of feedback. And thirdly, on the mobile issue, I mean, again, I'm wondering how things are developing, but the thought occurred to me that drone technology, for instance, is starting to be widely used by police forces. Whether there's any scope at some stage of exploring how that may enhance, especially in the rural areas, or if you want to deploy something to a particular place at a particular time. There may be all sorts of legalities around it, but again, it's about looking at all the options possible. And then finally, and I think the help button in the center of town is great, and more would be great. But as you were describing it, you talked about someone walking out of a bar, and there's people who walk out of bars at 2 a.m. in the morning who might be a bit mischievous. And I just wondering what safeguards are built into, you know, not having it abused or having resources directed inappropriately because somebody is actually, had a few drinks or whatever. So again, I just wonder whether that's factored into how that might be used and monitored. Sorry, there's rather a lot there.
No, that's fine. So I'll come to the help point first. Obviously, you're never going to prevent everybody from stop using it. That's just impossible. The thing with the help point is, because it does have this camera that's built in, the likelihood is we'll probably know who the people are that are messing around with it. So it'll be a case of going to visit them once they probably sobered up and explaining to them they shouldn't be doing this. So there is ways and means. Obviously, you've got the camera that sits directly above it as well. So if they did vandalize that property, that the larger dome cam should be able to capture that as well. You would hope that it would be fed through to the control room at the time. It then can notify the police as well. But you're never going to stop them all from doing it. I know another area that's had the help point, and I think it's been fairly successful. They've had no reports of vandalism of it, so I think it's been pretty good. In relation to the drone, I know one of my planning colleagues has actually looked into the drone, obviously for sort of photographs and things of that nature, and I know he's doing some work in relation to that. Whether Melton decide to go down the path of getting their own or outsource to ask other local authorities who do use them to come and do a bit of work for us, that's something that he's looking into, but that's something we probably have access to in the future. Replacing the cameras, yeah, quite right. From getting the cameras put in, obviously technology moves on extremely fast, especially in the CCTV industry. Obviously, I found that out when I started to take on this project. I'm confident that our cameras will be still very good and credible in 5 years. However, the ones that get used obviously most frequently, we'll look to replace them first, but it won't be like for like. There'll be obviously the new tech that will go on top of that. So it'll be an upgraded camera. We wouldn't have exactly the same model. So it just moved on so much by then. So be assured that the cameras, you'll probably have mixed and matched different cameras as the system progresses, because it's just the nature. You'll be going around full circle and you'll have different like types of cameras on there, but they will all be like the spec at the time. It won't be the same old camera on that one. In relation to the voice camera, there is technology currently that our WCCTV system uses. It's a bolt onto the system where you can actually speak to whoever you want to while they're out. It did look quite good. I was quite interested in it. There is a cost, I think it was around £1,500 for that. But it's only as good as the camera is monitored. So if you are lucky enough to capture, say, somebody fly tipping, for instance, you could say, wait, pick that up, take it back. But if no one's seeing it at the time, it's going to get missed. So you have to be if it's being monitored 24/7, I could see the benefit of it. And I do like the idea of it, but it could be quite easily missed as well. So you'd miss out on that benefit. But if we've got targeted areas, say gangs of youth doing antisocial behavior, and we've got a specific hotspot, it might be quite beneficial in them circumstances. So yeah, I'm open to it. It's not a massive amount of money, and we could potentially look at that in the future with our community safety partnership funding as well.
Thank you. Are there any further questions that anyone wishes to ask? I therefore propose that we say thank you to the officers for their very thorough presentation, and look forward to hearing of many successes in the future with the use of this system. Thank you. That concludes the business for tonight. I've not been notified of any urgent business, and therefore I'll close the meeting at 8. I was going to say not 7:45, 8:45. Thank you all.